Good evening and welcome to our January 14th, 2026 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. Paper copies of the agenda are available for those here in person, and the full packet is available on our website. Reviewing our agenda, first we'll consider our consent agenda. There are 2 items on that agenda. After our consent agenda, we'll have general public comment. We welcome general public comment for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our limited time and the need to have orderly and efficient meetings, we apply certain rules regarding public comments. We'll do our best to enforce these rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. Here are the rules. 1, each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we will accept public comment of any length in writing. 2, individual speakers may not donate unused time to other speakers. 3, all comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission. And 4, we reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Campaigning for public office during public comment period is not allowed. We invite you to give your full name and address for our meeting minutes and address your comments to the Commission. While not required, it does provide us context on the item and can assist if we need to respond later. Please also know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comment on the spot, but if you'll leave your contact information with county staff, we will try and get specific questions answered. After that, we'll move on to our regular agenda. There are 3 items on the regular agenda. Tonight, we're going to start with a planning item for a site plan at the 1700 block of East 902 Road. Then we'll have some information from the treasurer's office about the location of their treasurer's office. And then the 3rd item is an update on the Housing Stabilization Collaborative Rent and Utility Assistance Program. Those last 2 items are for information only. For each action item we'll hear from staff or the applicant, followed by questions from the Commission, and then open the item up for public comment relative to that item. Once public comment is closed, we'll bring the item back to the Commission for further discussion and vote. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. With that, Commissioners, I ask if there's any item on the consent agenda that you'd like to have pulled for further discussion.
I noticed Chad's over there, and I don't necessarily want to pull anything, but since he's here, I would like to ask him a question or 2.
Well, we probably should pull it if we're going to
ask
a question.
Pull 1.1.
1.1. Okay. Any other items, Commissioners? Anybody in the public who'd like to pull any items from our consent agenda? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay. Commissioners, I'd welcome a motion on the consent agenda.
This is Commissioner Reed. I move to approve consent agenda item 1.2.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. We'll move on to item 1.1. Commissioner Dorsey, do you just want to ask your questions, or would you like Chad to talk a little bit about the item?
Well, I just wanted, since he's here, I thought I would get his input on the estimate for the project. I noticed it was about 40% more than the low bidder after the one bid was rejected. And I talked to Sarah a little bit about this today, and I was just wondering if you could comment on the disparity between the estimate and the bidding.
Okay, yeah. So you're referring to the engineer's estimate,
yeah,
which we are required to provide with all of our requests for bids. And we're always pretty conservative. We always joke that we don't want to get the job. We always want to be, kind of at the high end and allow them to come in under. They were very competitive on this project, more so than a lot of other projects we see. Our estimates are pretty consistently matching what we're seeing for bids because we're using current information from projects that have been recently completed. So it's all based on calculations that we're doing. It's not something that we're just making up. So yeah, that was a significant difference, and obviously we're happy to see that.
Thank you. I move we approve agenda item 1.1.
Yeah,
Oh.
let's take public comment
Oh,
first.
sorry.
So do you want to withdraw your motion real
Yeah,
quick?
sure.
Okay. Motion withdraw. Is there anyone who'd like to provide public comment? Well, first of all, commissioners, any other commissioners have questions? Okay, no other questions. Is there any public comment on this item? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay, Commissioner Dorsey, go for it.
Okay, we approve agenda item 1.1. Consent agenda item 1.1.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further questions, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. We'll move on to general public comment. If you'd like to provide general public comment on an item not on today's agenda, now would be the time. Come on up to the podium. Hi, Tim. You got to hit the button first. There's a button right there and it'll turn green.
Okay.
You're on.
Tim Hamilton, 66044. I would like to just discuss briefly about the proposed resolution to provide attorneys for tenants, which was brought up, and we had a cavalcade of people talking. I was one of those. I spoke as a landlord and said that I believe that, and in fact, I'm certain of it, that rents will raise as a consequence because the only tool that landlords really have to battle with when their costs go up is to raise their rents. And when I was in the audience, I heard the advocates for the tenant side come up and say things that I now teach college as a college professor. And they say the things that are fingernails on a chalkboard to me, which is studies have shown, or the evidence is clear, or the analysts on data have shown. And you see these big platitudes. And as a professor, if one of my students does that, I want to know who did the study, where was the study, what was the time of the study? Because if it was a study in Atlanta, Georgia in 2011, that really doesn't have any bearing here. If it was a report that was issued in California, that doesn't bear on us here. Those states have different statutes. And of course, there's going to be different conflicts between tenants and statutes in those other states. Our statute's pretty clear here. It says, if you don't pay rent, then that's a basis of an eviction. And the evidence that was in front of this commission from many, many landlords, as well as your own staff that did research, was the main cause of evictions is failure to pay rent. That's pretty much it. So my point is, if taxpayer dollars are going to be used to pay for attorneys, and in addition to that, rents are going to go up as a consequence, it ought to be a darn good reason why we're doing it. And if anyone comes up and says that studies have shown, or a report or analysis, and they don't tell you where it's from, who did the report, and what the time frame is, I think you should summarily disregard it. That's it. Thanks.
Any other public comment?
Good evening, Sofiana Olivera, Lawrence, and I'm just going to follow them on the same subject. The transaction between a landlord and a tenant, it's a private transaction. If what you're considering passes, I would expect if I could get denied on a car loan or something happens with another business, you will provide legal services also, because it's a private transaction. My second point is, with a lot of passion, I've heard that landlords deny people because they don't make 30% or 3 times the rent, or they have other issues. When a landlord, I just want to explain what the decision happens when prospective renter brings in an application, a landlord has to consider, is this person, can they pay the rent? Will I be facing the situation of having to evict them? What the banks use is 3 times the rent for housing. Unfortunately, in Douglas County, it's in the 40s, but that's not the fault of the landlord. We have to make the best decisions for our business. Second, I have to consider the possibility of damages because nobody pays damages. And damages is a big cost. So I will give an example. Many years ago, I had a tenant who used a kitchen for to provide food for a restaurant. After he moved out, there was no way to just prime those walls and that ceiling. The drywall had to be removed with an incredible cost. The decision was made that we would take him to court. Of course, we won because it was devastating. He filed for bankruptcy. Many years later, I got 53 cents from the bankruptcy judge. I still have that check. And I look at that check when I make a decision on whether a tenant will cause more damage than I can afford. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Yes, hopefully I don't embarrass my county commissioner, Commissioner Anderson. I'm Jerry Cullenber. I'm the new mayor of Baldwin City, Kansas. And I just wanted to come up and introduce myself and say I'm very excited and looking forward to work with each and every one of you. I have a 45-year career in law enforcement. I have chiefed a couple of agencies, assisted and led other agencies. And I want you to know that with Baldwin City, where I live at 1419 8th Street, I just want to know that you have a good neighbor down there, and we will certainly do what we can to work well together. Okay, and the only other thing I might have to add is deputy, please understand, you don't think it now, but your career at 40 years comes a lot faster than you think. And before you know it, it's over. Thank you, commissioners. I greatly appreciate it. You have a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll let that one go on not addressing comments to the commission this time, but I'm teasing you. Okay, any other public comment? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay. We'll close general public comment and we'll move to our regular agenda. The first item is to consider a site plan for this site plan's number is SP 250012 for those keeping track at home for mini and self-storage use in the 1700 block of East 902 Road. And I see Becky Pepper is here. Hi, Becky.
Good evening. Let me just get this up and going here. Okay. Yeah. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you. My name is Becky Pepper. You may not, this is one of the first times I've been here in a while. I'm the planning manager and I am shepherding this project forward. Mary Miller was working on this project and then she retired. And so I'm helping with this. So it's a pleasure to introduce myself or reintroduce myself to you all. Sure can. Is that better? So this site plan, the subject property is located on the northwest corner near this city of Lawrence, just west of Rock Chalk Park. It is east of K10 Highway and south of 1750 Road. The property takes access from East 902 Road, which is unpaved from beginning at Rock Chalk Drive north from there. This gives you a closer look at the subject property. It is a parcel that's 11.6 acres. It is undeveloped. And in here, this picture, you can see it is immediately adjacent to electrical station, the Evergy substation. This view expands a little bit out so that you can see the surrounding zoning and the land use. As I mentioned, the property is adjacent to city property as well as county property. So we have city property to the north and west. That's the property that you see on the zoning graphic there. That's zoned R2. And then there's county zoned property to the west, east, and south. Those properties are zoned AG1 and AG2. They are primarily developed with agriculture, woodlands, rural residences, and as I mentioned, that Evergy substation.
Becky, can you be clear? When you said city or county property, you didn't mean the city of Lawrence property and Douglas County property.
Yes.
You meant county zoned property and city zoned property.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. But also that the properties that have city zoning are incorporated into the city of Lawrence. This subject property is in the unincorporated portion, as are the other properties that have the county zoning designation. The subject property is zoned LI, and I wanted to give you a little bit of background on this property. There's been a little bit of history just to get you from where we started to where we are now. Back in 2014, we had two applications submitted. We had an annexation applications and a comprehensive plan amendment. That annexation application included this property as well as other properties to the north and east. The annexation was heard by the Planning Commission, and they recommended denial, and the applicant then withdrew that annexation request at that time. They did move forward with a comprehensive plan amendment, and what that comprehensive plan amendment would entailed was revising the future land uses in the area plan, the K10 and Farmers Turnpike plan, which had noted at that time that the future land use would be residential and office. And with that comprehensive plan amendment, the future land use noted was changed to office and research uses. As I mentioned, the comprehensive plan amendment moved forward in the process. It was heard by the Planning Commission, the City Commission, and the County Commission, and all three bodies recommended approval. So that was an approved amendment. After that, the property owner submitted an application for a conditional use permit that would enable a self or mini storage use. This was back under our previous zoning code, and similar use, slightly different name than what we call it now. There's a little bit of rearrangement of the words there. That county conditional use permit was approved. And also at that time in 2017, they moved forward with platting the property. On that conditional use permit, there was a 5-year review period for county zoning and code staff. And at that time in 2022, due to limited progress on that conditional use permit, the self-storage use had not been developed. What they had done at that time was do some grading on the property and build a retaining wall. So given the limited progress on the property, staff brought the CUP to the Board of County Commissions for their consideration on rescinding that conditional use permit, and then the conditional use permit was rescinded, so that they no longer have approval for that conditional use. Also in 2022, there was a rezoning on the property. The property was originally zoned for agriculture. It was zoned A or A1. And because it was platted, when we converted our zonings when we adopted the new zoning regulations. We unintentionally converted that property to a CP use. Because at that time, it was kind of a broad rule that if a property was platted, it was going to convert to the CP zoning district, cluster preservation. We didn't identify that this was not a residentially platted property and that the CP zoning designation was inappropriate. And so once we identified that error, the rezoning request was brought to rezone it to a more appropriate zoning designation, the LI zoning district. I apologize for that error I see there. It's not IL, it is LI zoning district. And that zoning was identified based on the future land use that had been changed with the comprehensive plan amendment back in 2016. So it aligned the zoning with the future land use that was identified in that area plan.
I ask you a question at this point. The rezoning to light industrial, who requested that?
I think it was something that staff identified and worked with the applicant on that. So it was a joint effort.
And what is a cluster preservation?
It's a residential zoning district that is, we do not zone to it anymore. It's a retired zoning district, but we have areas in the county that were platted in smaller properties, smaller lots for more rural subdivision development. And so those properties that were in existence at the time when when the new zoning regulations were adopted, they got that cluster preservation. But it's basically a residential zone, county residential zoning district that is no longer available to become, you cannot zone to it, but it can have it if you existed in a certain type of development.
So they currently exist, so they're grandfathered in, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So we do have some across the county?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the item before you tonight is a site plan for the development of a mini warehouse, mini storage use. The site plan is in your packet. Here is a difficult to read image of that site plan. But this basically, they're proposing 6 one-story storage buildings that would provide a total of 609 storage units. Also included would be a 35-foot by 30-foot office. And there would be 14 parking spaces kind of scattered throughout the development. They're proposing on-site septic system. There will be security fencing around the property and then also a keypad entry and exit gates. And then they are proposing asphalt or chip seal surfacing on that access drive and on the areas around the development. So the zoning regulations for its site plan applications has review criteria listed, and I'll run through those for you. As stated in the site plan or in the staff report, pardon me, we found that some of the criteria were met, but not all of them were met. And there are about 8 criteria, and the first 3 here on this slide, we did find that they met. The first is that the use is permitted in the zoning district, and this mini or self-storage use is permitted in the light industrial zoning district. Second is the property platted or vested, and as indicated, it is platted. And then last is the site plan compliant with zoning regulations. Our zoning regulations does have specific use standards for some uses, and there are some specific use standards listed for this particular use. A rundown of that review is in your staff report, is in the staff report in your packet. We did find that this request is compliant with those specific use standards. The next two review criteria listed here on the site, on the presentation, is where we found that they did not comply. The subsection D talks about site arrangement compatible with nearby land uses. And in this one, we're looking at compatibility as related to the arrangement of buildings, parking, lighting, landscaping, and drainage. We did find that the arrangement of the drainage, parking, lighting, and the landscaping they're providing is compliant, but what we could not determine compliance with is with the drainage. The regulations does allow to ask for the county engineer to request drainage studies and traffic studies with the application. And in this case, we did request those studies so that we could get more information and do a thorough review of that drainage. The drainage study was not submitted by the applicant. However, they have proposed that it be a condition of approval, that it be provided if the site plan is approved, that it be provided later for review. Since we have not received that drainage study, we haven't been able to do that review on drainage impacts and determine those the compatibility with the nearby land uses. The second, or subsection E, then talks about vehicle ingress and egress to and from the site and circulation within the site, and that provides safe and efficient and convenient movement of traffic, not only within the site, but on the adjacent roadways. As I mentioned, we did request that the applicant provide a traffic study, and that was provided. That traffic study indicated that this use would increase daily traffic 109 trips. And as such, it was determined that the existing gravel road would not be acceptable to provide that safe and efficient access to the site. And that it would be requesting that they provide us more details on road design. And the applicant had indicated that they did not want to make improvements to the road, that would hinder, the cost of that would hinder the project of this moving forward. I also want to note that the county engineer provided a supplemental memo that has been included in your packet, and he can help if you have any questions related to those studies. And then lastly, the rest of the review criteria relates to public safety, landscaping, and outdoor trash screening. These, again, are items that we found the site plan is compatible with. However, just because there are those review criteria that are not compliant, staff is recommending denial of the site plan based on the findings listed in the staff report. So with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thanks, Becky. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
I do have one question. So under the review criteria, it does list that the site plan was compliant with zoning regulations. And then further down under review criteria, you did list that that the drainage plan has not been submitted as one of the reasons why it should not be approved. My question is around, and this goes back to last week with the plat and the subdivision that we had last week that was approved. That approval did not have a site plan that had been submitted. And so we approved that without knowing a site plan, with having no site plan approved. And so I'm just kind of curious how we value these different approval processes, because if that one was okay to approve without a site plan, and this one comes before us and we're hesitant to move forward with an approval, and we suggested denial because one of the reasons that we're denying it is the applicant does not have a drainage plan that has been submitted. I'm just kind of curious as to why that is one of the reasons for suggesting that this is not, a good criteria.
Last week was just an easement. It was not an approval of a site plan. So-
Right. But we moved forward with an approval, knowing that
Of
we
the
did not
easement.
have, yes, knowing that we have no idea what that site plan will look like.
It'll come back to you later
Correct.
and
And
you'll
in
approve it at
this-
that time.
Correct. And in this case,
You don't have an easement, you have a site plan.
Mm.
There's a site plan in front of you with a recommendation for denial. So you're a step beyond now what you were last week.
okay,
Last week was just the easement and a site plan will come back to you later. Now we're step B to step A in that situation.
okay. So you're missing pieces of this plan.
Correct.
There are different applications throughout the development process, and it can be that platting can be one of the first steps in the development process if platting is required or needed. And then another step could be a site plan application or a conditional use permit application, or even before that, you could have a rezoning application. So there are different types of applications that may be required in the process, and they're not necessarily required to come in at the same time. So someone could start the process to get certain approvals and then work on the next step and bring that back. And then also in your zoning regulations, there are different things that are required with the different applications.
So for this particular applicant, he's missing pieces of the plan. Is that what I'm
Of the
hearing?
drainage plan, correct.
Okay, all right, okay. And so for other applicants, they would have most likely have submitted a drainage plan at this point.
If required by the county engineer, not every site plan that may come before you will require it. There are going to be instances when we do need that information for further evaluation. There may be some others when we don't. In this case, the code does allow that our county public works engineer to make that request. In this case, he did request that with the application materials, and it has not been provided.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, at this time, we'll hear from the applicant. If the applicant would like to make a statement.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm David Hamby with BG Consultants, representing the applicant on the project. I first off wanted to just say thank you for planning staff. They've spent a lot of time on this project, and it's been about 10 years now that we've been working on this project on this piece of ground. So I appreciate everything they've done to try to get this to this point, and here we are today. So I wanted to just expound a little bit on the history of this project, going a little bit deeper than what Becky did. So with the CUP, when we got the CUP, the owner, that same month he got the CUP, requested a building permit for the retaining wall. And at that point in time, we had communicated with planning and codes department, and there was a miscommunication about whether that would expire or not. We were told if you got a building permit, then you were locked in for the CUP. Turns out later that information was either incorrect or interpreted incorrectly, because that's when the CUP was pulled back, even though he had already got the building permit and built it for the retaining wall there. So, but that led to the property getting then the IL zoning, or the LI now, but previous zoning code was a little bit different. But that allowed the use by right rather than the CUP for this piece of property. And so with the LI zoning, that allowed at the time the point that we looked at for this mini storage use. Just to fall back on when we did that CUP, there was a requirement, and we had a lot of discussion about the road at the time. There was a requirement at that time that the road be improved to county aggregate road standards, so 8 inches of gravel with an annual dust palliative treatment. And because at the time, Kanawha Township couldn't maintain a chip seal road. And so that's what we talked about at the time. So it was a fallback position, but that was written on the CUP as a requirement of the CUP. And so when we got the LI zoning, and then in 2025 is when we had a pre-application meeting and we discussed moving ahead with the site plan on this project. The same general layout as the original CUP, with the anticipation that the road would be the same understanding with a aggregate road annual dust palliative. And at the time that we had the pre-app meeting, there wasn't discussion about a drainage study. The previous CUP was approved without a drainage study. So again, I'll come back to that, but it wasn't an inadvertent oversight. It was a change in understanding for the drainage study. And I don't have a problem providing a drainage study, but as you'll find out as we work through this process, I didn't want to have my owner spend thousands of dollars on a drainage study when the road issue was unresolved. And so in 2025, February 2025, we did a pre-application meeting on the project, and then we submitted the site plan. So just about a year ago, we submitted the site plan. And by approximately, we had in April, we got comments back, addressed those to the best of our ability, and we came to a realization after meetings with Mary and staff that we weren't going to have an understanding of agreement on the roadway. And that's when the request for a drainage study came up at the same time as well. And so knowing that the county staff wanted a different road type, they wanted it paved and asphalt, then that was not a financially feasible option for my client to do because he's at the end of the road and there's 3/4 mile of road to pave and asphalt when there was a previous agreement, to do the gravel with the dust palliative. So understanding that, we had multiple meetings with staff and county staff, planning staff, and I requested it in July because we didn't have any road to move ahead. I requested Mary set up a meeting with the county commission and just get a yes or no vote on the site plan. And that went, Mary retired in end of August, and it's moved on, and here we are in January, and hopefully we can get a resolution to this at the same point in time. But again, I'm happy to provide a drainage study. I know we can resolve the comments of the county engineer. I've worked with them for 25 years now. And so it's not a question of whether we can do that. It's just a question of what it looks like. But at the same point, I want to get the road issue resolved first before my client spends any more dollars on engineering fees if there's a big unresolved issue out there at the same time. So let me just talk a little bit about what we did to try to resolve the road issue as well. So I mentioned what we talked about previously with the CUP, what was approved, but understanding that the township has a difficult time maintaining that road just because the road's been paved between here and there, and so they have additional traverse time. I requested a chip seal as an option and asked if that would be an approved option. And again, they don't have the ability to maintain it, so then the county would need to maintain it. I requested a possibility of a benefit district, even if it was asphalt. Initial implications on that was a no as well. As part of this, I requested that the project, we ran estimates and to improve that to city road standards would be about $9 to $11 million, depending on where it ends to the north. I requested for my client that a benefit district be set up and as part of the city's CIP program last year. That was not funded as part of the CIP. So there's just not a resolution for the road improvement that I could determine. I know planning staff has talked to city engineering staff as well. So I've ran a lot of those traps and I don't know what that looks like, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, David. Questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair, would you like to call for ex parte communication on this quasi judicial item?
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, we were going to remind each other of that.
Yeah, we were clear that a site plan approval required it, but we can certainly give it.
Okay, I'm glad you asked. So I did meet with David Hanby about this issue. He reached out a couple of months ago, probably October or so, about the road issue. And I'm pretty sure back in the day on Planning Commission, I would have voted on several of the many things that we saw, as probably Commissioner Kelly did also, and the rest of the Board of County Commissioners. I think we've seen some of these items related, but not this, come before us also.
Yeah, thanks for that, Commissioner Willie. I don't consider those ex parte communications because they were public meetings. So yes, I think I've touched this application in a voting way 3 or 4 times. So I'm very familiar with the property and I did speak with the applicant. I don't usually include that in ex parte either, but since we're there, we're there. But I didn't talk to anybody else about it.
I may have bumped into the applicant at a public meeting as well, so.
Any questions?
Applicant.
Okay. We'll take public comment on this item. Anybody would like to provide public comment? Now is the time. Not seeing anyone here at the courthouse. Anyone online, Sarah? All right, we'll bring it back to the commission. Typically, if we did have public comment, just for the public out there who this is not new, we would, the applicant would have an opportunity to respond to that. But in this case, we didn't have any public comment, so we'll skip that step. I actually had a question for Becky, and I'm trying to think about how to ask this, but so this request that we have to approve a site plan with the drainage study later, I feel like we've seen that before. Can you tell me why staff at this time decided not to go ahead with that and to make the recommendation for denial, and why other times we think that's fine? And you may have referenced that in your presentation, but I might have missed it.
Really, is with coordination with county staff. So I might defer to our County Public Works Director for that.
And before Chad, I just want to clarify, there's a lack of a drainage study and the traffic study situation as well. So there's two parts here as part of that, but Chad can certainly speak to it.
I agree with, the applicant's concern about doing a study with other issues pending and not going to that expense. And so I haven't really hammered on that issue in terms of comments or, requiring or asking for things. I think the traffic issue outweighs all of this. And so I've focused on that. The recommendation for denial is based primarily on the traffic. It includes the fact that there's not a drainage study. I agree also with David that a drainage study could be done, and that's not a huge challenge for an engineer like David to do that. We could work through making that part of a site plan in the future. But to your point, I totally agree that a site plan should not be approved tonight without a drainage study.
Okay.
It shouldn't be a contingency.
Because of the traffic issue, we got two things happening here, right? And you're saying because of the traffic issue, we shouldn't approve the site plan as your recommendation. If there wasn't the traffic issue there, you would maybe be okay working out the drainage part of it, or no?
I don't think a site plan should be approved contingent on a drainage study, because a site plan has to show what the drainage study is going to implement. So it's a very quick comment in the staff report from planning that there's no drainage study, and that's one of our basis for denial. And I didn't add to that because I believe that is a basis for denial.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question about the rezoning to light industrial. How will a light industrial site ever be developed at the end of a gravel road?
Not necessarily, but you do zoning for future situations. So as a part of, this is inside the urban growth area, and as development occurs, zoning is an indication of where things might happen. And if it were annexed into the city of Lawrence and the road was improved, it could be a great site for light industrial.
Can I jump in here? Commissioner Dorsey, maybe to your question a little bit, and Becky, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are permitted uses that don't have a set of criteria that would need to be met in that light industrial category. Is that correct, Becky? I mean, as I'm looking down the use table, and I'm seeing there are some things that don't have that set of criteria that it would automatically be approved, essentially, if the zoning is correct for light industrial. Other things, such as mini storage in this case, have other criteria. Am I right on that, Becky?
Correct. There, that zoning district permits a variety of land uses. still need to go through an approval process. So there still are going to be things that we may need to receive to review or that are required per code. But there are other land uses that could potentially be developed on that property with the road in the condition it is.
Thanks.
Would we also, though, still have challenges around a potential traffic study and
Potentially.
okay, so I'm just curious, even with the light industrial, would we still be running up the fact that that road is not chip and seal, right? And
That's
Chad?
You're asking a question. I would say that the list of uses that could be served by that road is very short.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I ask a question about the traffic study? I don't know if that's for Becky. We'll start there, Chad. So it mentioned that the use would add 109 daily trips. What's the usage now? Because there's not much on that road. So if the road ideally should handle less than 100, but it's probably not, even if you add 109, it's probably not a whole lot more. There's what? I mean, the Evergy substation and one house.
Yeah, we have one rural residence, which in our recent estimates is going to be about 7 vehicles a day. There's an Evergy substation. They may have days where they don't show up. There are other days where there may be trucks up and down that are a bigger impact. There's also an agricultural property there with buildings on it that has some activities going on that are maybe unclear, and there is traffic associated with those activities, more than a residence. And so in my report, I just rounded to 40 to say if people are going up and down that road to get to ag ground, to get to their facilities that are there today, that might be 40 vehicles. And I also pointed out that adding 109 to a road like that or any gravel road is more intense than we've ever seen.
Thank you.
So is light industrial actually the appropriate? Is this actually appropriate or should it actually go back? Or are we looking at a benefit district that we should actually be thinking of?
I guess I wouldn't look at it necessarily from what it should be. I mean, this is a site plan application, so rehashing what occurred as far as a rezoning probably isn't what I would recommend. There are permitted uses. There's different qualifications for those uses, and they, an applicant will have to come in and show that they can comply with that. In this instance, you have an application in front of you for mini storage, and the concern is the current road is not adequate to support the traffic volume that has been indicated by this report. So I just kind of want to clarify what's in front of you today. Again, there's always going to be opportunities to consider rezoning, but I would look at that as a within the context of an application.
Meaning that it can be done in the future. So if you've got something in front of you now that you have to vote up or down.
Absolutely. I'm just
If you-
also trying to think about like how we support the applicant, right? At the same time.
Then I think then they could come forward and talk about a different zoning use. Or a different conditional use permit, or variety of different options would be available to them.
Because as a commission, do we support benefit districts or that
Not in Douglas County,
not in Douglas County?
have to be inside the city of Lawrence.
Okay.
I'd make a couple comments about kind of the location here. It's a location between a substation and a major highway. So, light industrial within that footprint, it has some definite, it checks a lot of boxes there. And the city has annexed north and northeast of that property. So everything else at the end of that road has been annexed into the city and had conversations around future kind of large housing development in that area all the way up to North 1750 Road. So when we look at the map as we see it now, you don't see those pieces, but the future is that this is already annexed within the city of Lawrence, I believe, some of these major parcels here, and will someday then East 902 Road will be a city road. So the conversation then is when and what's the city's role in that? Because I look at it as a timing issue. If we were looking at a large traffic volume, but we were helping Kanwaka limp it along for a couple of years because the city's going to, create a benefit district and bring that road up to city standards for future development. That's a different conversation than what I think we get to have tonight, which is that the city has had that proposed for their CIP in a reasonable timeframe and has not yet added that. I do think the future of this road will be a city street, in which case there's a lot of things that could happen on that road that would be entirely appropriate. But that's, I think, the struggle here now is Kanwaka can't manage it as it is. There's not a compelling reason for Douglas County to take it over and manage it. And it's just kind of been isolated, especially when the walk path, bike path was brought so close to that road. There's really not even a lot of wiggle room without kind of addressing that also. I mean, there's just not much right of way there. Isn't that right? Looking at Chad.
It would be a difficult project to even make that a better gravel road.
So this is a very unique piece of property because of the substation there and because of where it is on the edge of the boundary. I take staff's recommendation very strongly. That's why we have staff to look at these things and to look at this property. Whether the applicant, I do feel like the applicant saying, well, could the county make it a road? Could the county work with this? Is getting ahead of a process. If the city wants to annex it and do that road, great. If Wakarusa Township, or not Wakarusa Township, if the township wants to do the road to bring it up to the standards that we need for this property, I think then we'd be having a different conversation. Clearly, the applicant has asked for that. We are not the only governing body that is saying this is not the right thing for this place right now. And so with that in mind, there are uses that are allowed within our zoning code that would not require all the different steps that Becky outlined here today. So that's not saying this property can't be used in some way. It just isn't appropriate for the type of use that that the applicant is currently asking for based on the conditions and the criteria that is in our zoning code. So I'm siding with staff on this and think it's important as we think through these things to go through the process, to listen to the staff that we hire to make these recommendations. I certainly understand the applicant's request. I know I've seen this property a number of times, and I understand the frustration of wanting to have that piece of property that's just beyond a boundary of the city of Lawrence or hasn't been annexed, or the frustration of saying, look, I'm trying to bring some taxable property into your township. Isn't the investment worth it? But I think if we are saying through a zoning application that we should do that, and not a zoning, a site plan application, that we should do that in place of that, I think we've mixed up the process here.
I have to say personally, this has given me some heartache over, like, it just seems like there's a solution here. But we've got, a lot of players trying to figure out what's the chicken and egg, what goes first. And I feel like the city in this conversation is the one that I'm really missing in terms of we know they just have to take over that road at some point because there's annexed property with some significant commitments at the end of that road, and they can't move forward with that until they've brought the road up to standards, city standards. But not knowing how long that would be, or I think that's frustrating for the applicant. I think it's frustrating for me to try and figure out how can we find a solution without that piece. So I guess that's the part that I feel stuck on. And again, it's different. We've got a township saying they struggle to maintain it as it is and don't want the additional work. I would take that pretty seriously. there's not really a good middle ground where the county can step in without a known timeline, especially. And then we're not hearing from the city on their plans for that. So I feel like we do have to follow the staff recommendation that all those conversations have been had and that this is still where we are. We're still stuck. But I also don't like that that's where we got with it. So, and that's not anybody's fault. That's just this piece of town, this part of town is kind of waiting to develop. And I don't know what that timeline is because it then falls outside of our jurisdiction.
Any other questions or comments? Make a motion to deny the site plan SP 25-0012 for mini and cell storage use at the 1700 block of East 902 Road based on the findings listed in the staff report.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Chad. All right, we'll move to the next item on our agenda. Apologize, my computer just decided to do something strange. Which is an update from the treasurer on some changes to the treasurer's office, and Adam Rains is here. Hi, Adam.
Adam, are you in the Zoom? Do you want to show your slides or?
Is it on the desktop here?
Okay, yeah. If you talk to Robin about it.
Yeah, it's here. All right, well, so here to talk about some changes to the treasurer's office, mainly the motor vehicle operations. It's kind of the agenda. We'll kind of walk through some of the wait times, staffing issues we've had, and some solutions we've.
Adam, are you sharing your screen on the county laptop? So you have to share the screen. There you go.
Better.
There you go.
Got it.
Thank you.
And then talk about some of the solutions. We really had it down to 2 solutions, but we've talked about this for several months. We probably started it sometime in July, August, talking about what changes need to happen to best support our office. Let's see if I can move this over real quick. So here's some of our wait times for our downtown office and our satellite office. We have some data back to 2019. You'll see there 22 and 23, we don't have any data. We had a different line management software process or program. We weren't able to pull some of that data. So we did have some from 2019, 2021. Of course, you don't see anything in there for 2020 because we were doing everything by mail, and then 24 and 25. So you'll see back 2019, our average wait time was about 11 minutes. So that's how long a customer's getting in line, waiting, and then getting helped at a window. Back in 2019, we did have 3 offices. We had the 6th Street and the Dillons, and then we had one on 31st Street. After COVID, we decided to close the 6th Street office. It was a very small office that only housed 2 people. So in 2021, you'll kind of see some of that data. Wait times at 10.2 minutes there. That was with the 31st Street and our downtown office. Of course, 22, 23, no data. 24 and 25, you'll start to see some of those wait times increase. You'll see it jump from 21 at 10 minutes to 24 at 14 minutes, and then 25 at 16 minutes. So same amount of staff. We're just operating out of 2 offices instead of the 3. In 24, the longest wait time we had was 2 hours and 40 minutes. And then 25, the longest wait time we had was 2 hours and 10 minutes. We're kind of in this awkward position as Douglas County where you have, you know, some of the larger ones, Wyandotte, Shawnee, which are very much larger than us. And we have some below us, Leavenworth, Riley, Butler, who are significantly smaller than us. So we're kind of in this weird situation. You know, if we look at the larger counties, you know, some of them, they're looking at, you know, 6, 7, 8 hour waits. Get an appointment, you're looking at, you buy a car today, you got to make the appointment today, otherwise you might not be able to get in. So when we compare it to our larger counties, we live a good life. When we compare it to some of our smaller counties, you know, that's when we kind of look like not providing services quick enough. So it's what category do you want to be jumped into, the larger counties or, you know, some of the smaller counties. Service time. So this is from when a customer gets to the window and how long that service is taking. On average, across the board is about 9 minutes. You'll see in 2019 at 9.9 and then 2025 at 9.3. You'll see some fluctuation there between offices, but again, in 2019, we had 2 satellite offices compared to now of just 1 satellite office. Again, here, our longest wait time or service time in 2024 is 3 hours and 9 minutes. In 25, it was 3 hours and 27 minutes. So that's how long it's taking for a customer. They walk in, they're presenting us with, you know, these situations are most likely, they have multiple titles, they have multiple very complex situations that they need to run through, and they are taking 3 hours. These are the outliers. I would say not every transaction is taking 3 hours. We have, you know, our quick ones, renewals take less than 3 minutes to process. But there are some transactions that customers do come in for that take a very long amount of time to process. So here we're kind of comparing the wait times and our transactions. So 2019, before the great year of 2020, we processed about 130 transactions or 130,000 transactions, wait time about 11 minutes. Again, that's with 3 offices. And then we moved kind of down to 2021 because 2020, we were all doing everything by mail. Kind of surprised that these numbers were what they were because there were a lot of executive orders from the governor that delayed people having to renew or having to get tags. So in 2021, we actually saw a lot of those vehicles and those customers coming in that didn't do it in 2020 when they were, let's say, supposed to, but within their 60 days, because there were so many extensions. I think that officially ended February of 2021. January and February were busy, but I was kind of surprised to see the numbers for the year weren't as large as what we thought they would be, and then the wait times were pretty standard for us. 2022 and 23, you'll see the transaction data there with no wait times. And then 24, you'll see at 128,000 and 14 minutes. Again, you're seeing those wait times increase. Those are operating out of 2 offices and not 3. In 2020, we did process about 120,000 transactions. So a lot less than what we have compared to the other years. Kind of getting to some staffing. Well, this is kind of a good slide, I think, to show what we've hired over the years. So for example, someone who started in 2019 may have left in 2021. So they're showing on there, you know, we're hiring 1 or 3 people in 2021. Some interesting data that I was able to pull. So this shows back to 2019. From 2014 to 2018, we hired 1 person a year. In 2013, we hired 3. In 2012, the state got a new motor vehicle system. I don't know if you were around for that time, but motor vehicle operations were a nightmare. We're talking 6, 7 hour waits, programs not working correctly, lines out the door here. So it was very frustrating. And so I think that's why we saw that increase of people leaving. Mostly, I believe, I wasn't here at the time. I was hired in 23, but or in 2013, but I believe it was people who were about ready to retire and just finally like I've had enough of this nightmare. I'm just going to go ahead and get out now. So very interesting to see 2013, we hire 3 people. 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, we're hiring 1 person a year. And then we turn around 2019, we hire 3, 2021, we hire 3, and you'll see 23, 24, and 25. 25 was a good year, I would say, but 23, 24, we've hired 8 people. That means 8 people who have a lot to learn. These are transactions that take time. We usually say once you hit your 5-year mark, you're very independent, you're very efficient, you can run through things by yourself and not require a lot of help. Up until that point, they do still need a lot of assistance and have a lot of questions. So here kind of outlining, I think on this slide, I have 10 staff at 0 to 5 years. That number is actually 8. I miscounted. 2 people actually went to our tax side. So we have 8 staff members who have been here less than 5 years. We have 2 staff members who are at, 5 years now. I think one just celebrated his 5-year anniversary in January. The other one won't be till August, but we have 2 right around that 5-year mark. Everybody else, so the rest of the 5 have been here less than 4 years. We have 1 person hired in 23, 3 in 24, and then 2 in 25. So kind of showing what it's looking like for our frontline staff. They're the ones taking in the customers, they're helping customers. And we have 3 individuals who have been here 10 plus years. So a very big range on what that looks like. Trying to move 3 people to the right office to make sure that we have a good mix of experience and inexperienced staff to make sure we're able to process transactions quickly. With that, 11 people, 11 staff have left the county, kind of counting some of that out. We've only terminated 2, so it's not because we're just firing people. It's because they get in, they see the work, they realize maybe this isn't for them. They realize the work is actually more than they expected. We try to have those conversations up front in interviews, but if you ask any of my staff, they'll always tell you, I never would have thought it would have taken this much work. They've thought, oh, come in for a couple months, be trained, be ready to go. It's like, no, you're 6 months to a year of hard training. There's a lot of information, a lot of gray area. We're working with programs we have no say in, so it is at times very difficult work. Their workday, so I kind of went back through 2024 and looked at, on average, how many staff members we had out each day. So I started on Friday, went back a couple weeks, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. That way we kind of got a range all 5 days of the week. We usually try to encourage staff to take off Wednesdays because those are our slower times. We encourage staff to avoid the end of the month because those are our busy times. But on average, we have a little over 2 staff members out each day. Sick leave, vacation, funeral, FMLA, everything that kind of involves why they need off for the day. The most staff off in one day was 6. So that would leave 5 people on our front line processing transactions. So we have 2 offices, so that means 2 at one and 3 at the other. So, imagine coming in and there's only 3 people here, come in at lunch, now there's only 2 people there. It can create some struggles. Rarely are we very full staffed. I think when I went back through this for 2025, there was only 1 day which I counted that had everybody in the office. So some things that staff are doing. So they're helping walk-in customers. They're helping those appointments. They're processing mail, dealer titles, repossession. So what you see on the front line, they're not just helping those walk-in customers. They have other duties that they also need to take care of. Mail, dealer titles are big ones, and we get a lot of repossessions. So they're processing those as well. That's kind of for the frontline staff. So those 11 individuals. We also have a back office is what we call them. We have 4 individuals who are able to kind of do that back office work, which they're helping answer questions for that front line. They process take about 2,200 phone calls a month, which is about 12 per hour. So they're constantly on the phones helping customers who do call in. Excuse me. So like I said, we've been kind of talking about this since July. We had our October training in for Columbus Day. And what we do is we bring in a speaker from KU, and the topic that they chose was workplace well-being. And I think that kind of really shed a lot of light into the conversations we are already having. From that training, we found out a lot of staff were running through some burnout. Several people kind of reaching their breaks. And so I think it was at that point we're like, we got to do something, or we're going to be in this endless cycle where we hire staff, they get burnout, they leave, we hire staff, and just never getting out of that little rut that we're in. So things we've done over the years, a snack area, I buy granola bars and snacks and candy and just kind of anything they request. Staff also does the same, bring in pizza or something like that. Of course, that's all funded by staff. That's coming out of their own pocket. We have adult colorings, we have puzzles for breaks, so they have the opportunity to escape that front line, to go to my office here, or at 6th Street, there's a little area where they can put puzzles together on their breaks and kind of chip away and disconnect from customers. We do have opportunities for them to step away after the difficult customers. So they run into one that's just really rough for whatever reason. They always have that opportunity, and it's something we started years ago because we want to give them the break to come back and be able to focus on their next transaction without worrying about what just happened. We share kudos and positive thoughts and reflections throughout the day. So if we notice that staff had a really rough day, we'll encourage them all to kind of share something positive that happened throughout their day or the week, just to kind of bring spirits up. And then the training in October, staff really love that. It's an opportunity for them to escape. We do a lot of team building. We bring in the speakers from KU, kind of have some conversations. So it's been really good. Staff loves that. Some contributions to burnout. As you all know, political climate, it's the world we live in now. Workload, there is no or very little downtime for staff. They're not helping those walk-in customers. They're processing mail, sending letters, doing incompletes. So there's just a lot of work to go through. Increase in new staff. We're not getting through customers efficiently. We're not helping them as quickly as we can. Of course, frustrations with the Department of Revenue. I think those will always be there, but how we mitigate the other things and lack of support and resources. Two of the major solutions we kind of came across, and this is when we kind of started having conversations with Sarah. One of them was moving downtown to appointment only. So 6th Street, we have staff out there, and then if you wanted to come downtown, you had to make an appointment. One struggle we found with this is that we're open. Customers will think we're open, trying to come in to get walk-in service. I'm explaining to them we don't do that, having to send them to 6th Street. As we know, parking situation, them walking up, some individuals who may not have the best ability of climbing stairs, that causes issues too. We all want to help everybody. We're not here to send people away. So we saw a lot of struggles with that, I would say. And it takes a while for customers to realize that that's kind of what's going on downtown. So the other solution was moving all to one office. Our 6th Street office is our largest. We can fit all of our staff there. We have strategies in place to provide what we call a check-in person. So you come in, staff's going to review paperwork, see what you're missing. That way you can go get it. You can come back and make an appointment. That way they're not waiting the 30 minutes, an hour, getting to the front line. Then that clerk's explained to them, biggest one is you don't have an inspection. You got to come back. We cannot process without an inspection, or you're missing a title. So I think that would help with working through those transactions a little bit faster, not spending time on a customer who's not getting their work completed. So that's what we really moved forward with, was moving to 6th Street. The goal is February 16th. The goal would be to fill all seats, have a check-in staff member, able to support staff, efficient use of all staff, and fill the seats when possible. So we're really going to push training for those new individuals. We're going to dedicate time, knowing that the front line will be fully staffed. We'll dedicate time. The goal is once a week. So we meet with the staff at least once a week. A supervisor will go over, things they're seeing in their work, provide that training, providing them the time to sit and think rather than looking at the customers in the waiting area. I'm providing them a space in the back to kind of process and really hopefully that it kind of sticks rather than the current process is here's the error. Can you fix it? They fix it, but not really processing what they need to do in the future for that transaction not to happen again. Moving forward, so we're coordinating with IT, maintenance, and the communications director. We're having signs made. You saw the press release go out on Monday. Communicate with customers. So we're going to hand out little cards to customers. That way, when they're coming in now, if it's a new title, they have to come back in August. At least they'll have that information and be aware of the change happening in February. Any questions?
Commissioner Dorsey, do you have a question?
Yeah, not about this. The staffing for the Baldwin City temporary office, that comes out of your total staffing. So the week you have people down there, you have one or two less at 6th Street.
Yeah, so we send one individual out there the second full week of the month, just a member from our staff. So what we'll do kind of during this process is just evaluate how things are going. If we see an increase in traffic at Baldwin, we have a good relationship with the bank there. They basically said, use it whenever you need to. So we have that ability to say, okay, maybe we need to extend it to 2 weeks. And then kind of moving forward with that. So we do have that ability with Baldwin, and that office will continue to be open. Also, I think another thing is the $3 fee will still stay. Right now it's at both offices. That $3 facility fee will still stay at the 6th Street office.
Any consideration to doing a temporary in Eudora?
There's been conversations. We haven't come up with a great plan, but I think now that we have maybe some extra equipment, it's something that we can consider. It does take quite a bit of setup, coming up with a good time of the month, and having conversations with the city of Eudora of where would work best, how much we're being charged for rent or leasing a space. I know Wyandotte County has worked with Bonner Springs is setting up 2 individuals doing just renewals. And they said that's gone very well. And that's something that's kind of in the back of our brains of like, could this work at, Baldwin, or not Baldwin, but Eudora, even possibly Lecompton. So those are things that are on the table. We haven't not considered it. So.
Adam, originally when we were hearing kind of some thoughts around this, thought maybe just motor vehicle was going to move to the 6th Street location, and then either one would be available for other transactions. But this is to go entirely to 6th Street. What would then be happening at the courthouse?
So this would be all motor vehicle staff. So our what we call our tax department would stay here. They're doing deposits for other county departments. They're working with the appraisers and clerk's office more closely. They will stay here. So we won't have any in-person services here at the courthouse. So if they're paying taxes, that'll go out to 6th Street, but they won't be necessarily available to come out and help customers. Maybe some rare situations that they identify, they'll have a customer come in, but for the most part, there will be no walk-in customers at the courthouse.
Would the behind the scenes people answering the phones still be here, or would they move to?
Yeah, so for the back office for motor vehicle, the motor vehicle will all move out there. So all phones will be answered out there for motor vehicle. Tax has their own line. They'll answer phones here. Basically all motor vehicle will shift out there.
What conversations have you had in the community just with folks that would be using these services, and how do they feel about it?
We haven't had any conversations with the community, I would say. We haven't done like a public forum or anything kind of like that, just what was been communicated on the social media posts. So yeah, we haven't really done a lot of communications with the public as of now. After this meeting, we'll really start hitting that hard of getting this information out there. We're going to start pushing customers to renew online, to use the Dropbox, to mail it in. I mean, I think those are great services that, some people don't want to pay that $3 fee. If you renew it online, you don't have to pay that $3 fee. If you drop it in our Dropbox, you don't have to pay that fee. So there's ways around it. Of course, you're waiting to the last minute of the end of the month and you got to come in. Like, I can't help you in that situation, but you've had the whole month. You've got your renewal notice 6 weeks in advance. So like you've had this awareness. It's just, are you wait to the last minute and decide that you got to come in? There's other ways of processing that transaction.
Adam, we included in our legislative priorities some request for the Kansas legislature to give some authority to the county to be able to set fees. If you had more dollars coming your way, would you reopen this office? What impacts would that have?
I think so. I think if we had more funds coming in and we're able to efficiently staff our office, I would say that's a high possibility. I think there's a lot of things in the air as of right now, as far as what this looks like. This could go great or this could go terrible. So I think over the course of this year, we're just going to kind of evaluate, see what things are like. Again, if this goes terrible, then we kind of retreat and come back to what we're doing. But we're going to really hit hard that training and getting staff up to speed and going over those awkward situations with transactions that just rarely come up. And hopefully, if we have to come back, we at least have them in a better spot to efficiently serve the public.
I feel like this is an opportunity that I can't pass up, Commissioner Kelly, to state that this is a service that is required by the state of Kansas, that the county is providing on behalf of the state of Kansas. The fees are designed so that the person who is using the service is paying for the service. The fees currently do not cover the cost of providing this service in Douglas County, and local property taxpayers are subsidizing this service by over $1 million a year. So in addition to the fees that are brought in. So that is the important part of our legislative platform, is that local property tax dollars are having to offset the cost of this service. I would say if fees were increased and we could reduce the burden on property taxpayers related to this service, it's potential that, those fees would cover additional staff that would make life a little bit easier.
And not just Douglas County. I think we've hit all 105 counties in the state of Kansas are having to supplement.
Not all 105. So I
Pretty
think
close.
I think there's a couple counties that do all right, one or two. But I just
Yeah,
I don't
maybe
wouldn't
one or
say
two.
all without having checked the numbers. But most local tax, it's a state provided service, and locals are subsidizing it.
I think the last estimate was Kansas counties were providing over $16 million in property taxes that pay for motor vehicle operations. I think that was a 2024 figure. We know cost of paying our employees is going up. So, that cost is just going to continue to rise.
It seems like you have good relations with other county treasurers. Are they making similar shifts in their communities?
We've seen some shifts in Sedgwick County, which was a pretty big deal. They shut down one of their larger offices and consolidated, I believe, into one. They may have like a few smaller satellite offices that, kind of does a renewal, a couple days a week or something like that. But Sedgwick County was one county that their commissioner said they were no longer going to fund motor vehicle through property tax. So they had to come up with some quick ideas on how to reduce that cost.
I just want to be clear that not everybody in the community, sometimes when I visit with people, they don't realize the treasurer's office is elected, right? And so this is the decision, this is for just our information only, right? This is a decision that you're making, but often they will come to county commissioners and say, tell me why we close this office. Can you give us one or two sentences? I mean, we could just say, call Adam Rains,
Yeah,
but
go
I
for
think
it.
you'd probably like us to give them maybe you're a pretty busy guy and you'd like us to give them some other information. Can you give us one or two sentences or maybe three that we could tell them why you're making this decision?
Yeah, so it is my decision. We're here today to inform you all. That way you're aware of pretty major change to county operations. But really why we're doing this is to help support our staff. We don't want to be in a hole for the next 5 years and kind of that cycle I talked about earlier. To better support them, to provide them with some training, to provide them with resources. That way they can get up to speed and we can better serve, the community. If we're continuing in this, slump, we're never going to get out of it. So we have to do something drastic to get us out of this hole. But yeah, it's all geared towards our staff. Our staff needs the training. They need that ability just to disconnect and focus on learning rather than focus on just let's get these out as quickly as possible. So
I've lived here over 20 years and I've never done a transaction in the courthouse. I've been to the Dillons on 6th Street, I've been to 31st Street, and now I've been to the new office on 6th Street. I suspect you will find other people who've lived here 40 years and have never done anything other than in the courthouse. So change is going to be much harder for some people. And I would say put signs on the front and the back door. Don't let them even get up the stairs.
it's a plan. We plan on putting signs in the parking lot, around the area. Social media will be a big one. We're handing out flyers to individuals. But yeah, this wasn't something we just kind of thought of last week. It's been an ongoing, discussion of how do we better support our staff within, means that we can. So we've been talking about it since July, and October was a big shining moment of how burnout staff actually was. And we want to support staff. We want to be there for them. We want to provide them with tools and skills to kind of diminish burnout, but it's going to happen. But we want to at least support them through their tough times and get them through it. So.
Adam, you talked quite a bit about wait times kind of early in the meeting. And do you have a goal or an idea of how the move will impact wait times so that it's not just, for the staff, but also for the client base?
Not necessarily. I don't know if we have a great way of kind of figuring out what that looks like because, we're all dependent on that walk-in customer coming in. So if customers start transitioning to doing it online because they just want to come to the courthouse or they want to drop off that renewal here, and we start seeing a decrease in foot traffic, that'll have a major impact on what wait times could be. We still have individuals that have to come in for titles. I would say that's our biggest, I would say barrier, but that's the only transaction you have to come in for. Everything else can be done through mail, can be done online. So it's tough to say. I don't want to say, well, we're going to increase it or we're going to decrease it. I think we'll just kind of have to wait and see. I would say the good part about this process is February slow, March starts picking up, April picks up, and then once we get to July and August, or June, July, and August, that's when we're at our busiest. So by then we'll have a good idea of what the worst case scenario would be for wait times. I would say up until that point, we'll have best case scenario of what wait times are in March won't be as bad as what they are in July.
Do you have any plans yet, in all the thinking through how to logistically make this move happen, how to all the strategies for talking to the public about it? Has part of that plan included yet how you're going to sort of evaluate through this coming year, because the memo that you gave us indicates that the intent is to try this for at least a year. And you've said during the meeting here, sort of see how it goes and determine whether or not there's the ability to come back here or the need to come back here for any reason. Are there other ways you plan on just evaluating, and I'm thinking more like beyond the wait times, sort of the concrete numbers that you gave us, but more like seeking customer, feedback, evaluating how staff are managing the change or reacting to the change?
Yeah, so we have a couple tools. I think the biggest one, which we will push once we get out there, is that if they're getting in line with our weight system, is called Q-Track. They have the opportunity to fill out a survey on how their service was. So we use that currently as a kind of a evaluation tool for how we're doing over the last month. Kind of reading through those and seeing what customers are saying. We want them to be honest. We want to give us good feedback. That way we can address issues. We also will look at our staff members on the training they're getting. What we do is we look at the errors that they get, things they mess up that KDOR says that we're not getting done correctly. We evaluate those errors. We go over those errors. So if we're starting to see those reduce, we're starting to see less questions from frontline staff. We kind of evaluate those too. We kind of have a good idea of where they're at within their knowledge based on the questions they're asking. So we do have a couple tools just to kind of keep an eye on how that progress is going. If we get down the road and things are flourishing and we're doing well, I think at that point we can have a conversation about, do we need to come back here? Or maybe we get out to 6th Street, like, no, this is great. It's actually better for customers. It's better for staff. And I think we can make that determination at that point. But I think just over time, it's just learning about how this is going to go. We don't have a great idea. We all have our different opinions on how it'll go. It'll go great. It'll go terrible. It'll be all right. We'll survive, kind of thing. So it's just kind of taking all that information in and coming up with a solution down the road.
Well, I'll just share a comment that I think what I project to be a really big positive, I would certainly assume for your staff, but also hopefully it'll be noticeable by the public and customers, is that check-in clerk. So the consolidation of services allowing you to introduce that piece of a process that you haven't been able to do before. I presume that will make a big difference, and I'm hopeful about that piece of it for all around and its contribution to efficiency and less frustration. So.
We've talked about it for years. Other counties do it. Shawnee County really does it. I would probably say the best, just from talking with other counties. They say it's great because you can stop them from coming in. Another big one is no insurance. They come in without insurance. Well, sometimes it takes a little bit to set that up with your insurance company to get a card back or get an email. So not letting them get to the front line and then having to go through that process of, you don't have insurance, so let me try to set it up. And that customer's waiting there for 15, 20 minutes when we could have been done with that transaction. So it'll be really beneficial. DMV uses it up here for getting your driver's license. My wife used it. She said it was awesome because she knew she had everything. By the time she got to the window, she knew she could at least get helped and not fail her eye test, but at least she could get helped and get her driver's license that day.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right, we'll see if there's any public comment. Adam, any public comment on this item?
John M. 66049. I wondered who Adam was, so it's nice to meet you and see a face. This is just personal experience. I did do design in call centers and transaction centers for a long time. I don't know what your software is. It sounds like it's really terrible. But from a personal experience perspective, I will never pay that $3 for electronic transaction. Never. So I will mail you a check. Got 3 cards. You get 3 checks. I guess the property taxes. It's more expensive for your staff to open mail, I would have presumed. That was always true of when I worked in a mail center, as opposed to an electronic transaction, which never touches a person or shouldn't, and gets automatically processed. In my day, in my transaction center, that was the way it worked. So I just want to say that that $3 cost inhibits me, and I'll bet it does in a lot of other people also. I don't really understand why it costs $3 to process a transaction with a credit card. A lot of businesses, you never, if it is in there, you never see it. And I'm pretty sure to see it explicitly inhibits a lot of people from doing what should be a more efficient transaction. Thank you.
Any other public comment here at the courthouse? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay. Well, this was an informational item only. Commissioners, if you'd like to make any statements about this, or we can move on to our next agenda item. Okay. Thank you, Adam. We'll go on to our next agenda item, which is a Housing Stabilization Collaborative Rent and Utility Assistance Program 2026 update. Jill, are you kicking us off on this?
I am. Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Happy to be here tonight to give you all an update on the Housing Stabilization Collaborative. Kristen's going to queue up a brief PowerPoint to walk folks through, just give you a little bit better illustration of the changes that are going to be made. I hope I put a good amount of information. Kristen and I developed the information that's in the AIR, the cover memo, just giving you all a sense of the program history, the program changes that happened this past year, in light of the funding changes that were made, that we experienced, and then what the program changes are proposed to look like in 2026. We walked through all that in the cover memo, and I think just before Kristen starts, I want to talk briefly about, especially for new commissioners, about just what is the Housing Stabilization Collaborative. It is a collaborative group of individuals that are representatives from, it's a coalition of the willing, of agency representatives of any agency that in any way, shape, or form works with individuals that are experiencing a housing crisis or housing instability. So that's everything from the Ballard Center to Catholic Charities to Salvation Army. And folks show up on a monthly basis, and we talk about issues of mutual concern, and we work on a consensus basis to identify what's the best use of the resources that we have available to us. So often meetings are kicked off with who's got funding opportunities, where are there some new projects that are that have opened up a wait list. You may have heard about Delmar Place just opened up their wait list, but there's others. So it's sharing resource opportunities. Are there new grants that are available, or resources that are available that are related to, in general, rent and utility assistance? The work that and we work on a consensus basis. So a lot of facilitation is done on the part of Kristen. I provided support as needed, but that's largely what Kristen's role is, to facilitate that group and work on a consensus basis on what does the program look like, and how do we work collaboratively together. So it's consensus based. So what you're going to hear about was developed based on the consensus of the stakeholders in that group, and we're really proud of that work. So county staff had a lot of role in this, but at the end of the day, this is a reflection of what our partners think is the best solution moving forward. So I just want to offer that. And with that, Kristen, I'll let you kick it off with that PowerPoint and introduce yourself if folks don't know you.
Hi, Commissioners. I'm Kristen Egan. I am the relatively still new Housing and Human Services Program Manager here at Douglas County, and I oversee the Housing Stabilization Collaborative. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background first. I don't know what I did there. We still have the shared goal, using our funding to prevent as many people as possible from falling into homelessness from a financial crisis. Let me see if I can figure out how to actually work this. Got it. Okay. It changed on my screen. Resume. Thank you, Jake. Jake helps me a lot. Okay, so let's first talk about how the program has been structured. And I've been here since May. The program's been around for longer than that. But right now it's just emergency assistance only. So short-term financial assistance to folks to serve an immediate crisis. It is limited to 1 time per year per household, but there is no cap on funding. You must have an eviction notice or a disconnected utility to be eligible for the assistance. Very low barrier, and we use a lottery system since the need outweighs the funding so greatly. There are some strengths with the system. We're serving people, we're getting funding out there, and it's very easily accessible. You can apply online. It's a short-ish application. And then it goes into a totally randomized lottery. And then those winners that are selected, those application goes to the processing applications, other members of the Housing Stabilization Collaborative. The lottery system and kind of forcing people into crisis, we've all noticed is a weakness. So when I put crisis-driven eligibility, I mean, we're forcing people into a crisis before they're eligible. They have to have an eviction notice or a disconnected utility. So things have already gotten bad. And I think by waiting that long, we may be increasing the amount of funding we have to use to get folks out of a crisis. We also moved to a once per month lottery. That is too slow. We have people that apply, if we're forcing them to have an eviction notice and then waiting a full 30 days maybe before they get selected, they're far enough into the eviction, it can't be stopped. Some of them are already out. So forcing them into a crisis, but then not responding to the crisis in a timely manner. The other big issue that we've noticed, myself and the other members of the coalition, is that the lottery system is not targeting folks most at risk. They may be more at risk of eviction because they have to have an eviction notice, but it's not targeting populations that are shown when they are evicted, they are more likely to fall into homelessness. So we're hoping to fix that with a prioritization tool. So let's talk about our proposed structure. I guess, let me go back one. Oops. Oh no. Jake. Here we go. This is another main problem that we have with the current structure. You don't have to be able to sustain your rent going forward. So we have a lot of applicants that have 0 income, and we will pay their past due. They no longer are at risk of eviction, but then the next month they can't pay their rent and they can get evicted the next month. So it feels a lot like we are delaying homelessness rather than preventing it for a lot of households. And that's important here on the next slide. So in those cases, we're proposing that there's a small leg of the HSC funding that is move-in assistance. So when we do select an applicant who, let's say they're on a limited income of $1,200 a month and their rent is $1,500 a month, that doesn't make sense to keep them in that unit. It makes sense to help them find a unit that's affordable so they can have sustainable housing instead of just delaying their crisis. We think that would be a better use of the funds. That doesn't happen all the time, but we want to have that option for folks that are selected and very vulnerable to move them to a sustainable solution. So that is available in our proposed structure. But let's go back to the emergency assistance. So one change is that we will require to get this emergency funding that you can sustain your rent going forward. If your rent is higher than your income, you get routed to move-in assistance. But otherwise, if you can afford the unit going forward and you had a hospitalization, just some kind of family emergency, there's lots of reasons people fall behind on rent. We can get them caught up, and then going forward, they're sustainable. So that's the households we want to focus on.
Hey, Kristen, one thing that came up in our last meeting was for folks that are going to get move-in assistance, the housing search. Can you just tell the commission about the rental list that goes out regularly and how that partner agencies are willing to step in to help folks?
Sure. So we do understand with move-in assistance, that's going to be a little bit more labor intensive for the processing agencies and possibly for me too, depending on who has capacity. There's a list that the community, LCS leads it, but a lot of us participate. We call landlords each month to see what they have available the coming month so that we can provide that to the tenants and help them locate a unit that's actually sustainable. This avoids having an eviction on their record, so they're more easy to rent to, right, than if they had an eviction on their record and then they're trying to find a unit. And some housing navigation, and we're going to experiment with that and see how labor intensive it is. But a big part of what we want to change is more connection to area resources and supports, whether or not the applicant is funded. Did that explain it, Jill? Okay. Okay, so on the emergency assistance side, one main change is that you're going to need to have some income. Like I was saying, you're going to have to be able to afford your rent going forward reasonably. And then we would like to replace the lottery system. So right now, all the applicants go into a big pool. We use a randomized system and those folks are picked. We want to replace that with prioritization so that when applicants apply, we will be asking them questions to determine how vulnerable they likely are to fall into homelessness if their eviction is not stopped or if their housing isn't stabilized. So things like single parents with kids in the household, that is shown when those folks are evicted, they are more likely to fall into homelessness. With that specific population, it's also important to realize we don't have an emergency family shelter. We have Family Promise, which is fantastic, but it's not emergency. So that's really hard when families fall into that. It's also generational trauma. And if a single adult falls into homelessness, we do have some sheltering options. That's just kind of an aside, but we really want to target these populations that are shown to be more likely to become homeless. And luckily, I guess, or those are also the same populations we're trying to target in A Place for Everyone and the Community Health Improvement Plan. Okay, I do have a little workflow there at the bottom, but I'm going to talk about at the next slide what changes in practice, but I'll go through this real quick. People just apply online. It's the same. It's just different questions, and we think it'll be a shorter questionnaire. First, eligibility check. That means like, do you live in Douglas County? I think there's 4 questions on that one. Then the priority tool, that's asking about their demographic information so we can try to target the populations most at risk. And then they come in, every week, I will look at them and pick the highest scores to fund. So rather than every month, it will be every week. So just in practice, what does this look like? Applicants apply online. They can do it by themselves. They can do it with an agency, the same as we are doing now. Applicants will complete the questionnaire and help us determine vulnerabilities. This is a change because the vulnerabilities are addressed in the prioritization tool. We are no longer going to have set-asides for the 3 agencies that we currently do. We're hoping to capture those vulnerable populations through the prioritization tool. So for instance, Senior Resource Center serves seniors, but also those are very often on fixed incomes. So those are given points in the prioritization tool. From there, I will I'll use the score to determine weekly the most vulnerable applicants. I route those to the appropriate agency. So if they're a family, I'll route them to Family Promise or Ballard Center. If they are a single adult, maybe they would go to Salvation Army. If they're a Senior Resource Center. And from there, nothing changes. We will process the applications the same way that we already do. And we're hoping this starts in February. The IT department has been very helpful. And in addition to those bigger changes we want to make, our goal in the coming year is to kind of bolster up a system of referrals so we can get people connected, or at least offer connection to services that already exist in our community, like the self-help desk and things like that, so that, because we can't fund everyone, we never have been able to, but we do have a lot of services, and connecting folks so that they're supported is important to us. So that's what I have for you guys if you have questions.
Thank you, commissioners. Questions?
You may not have an answer to this, but do you have any idea of the people you serve, how many are employed and how many aren't employed?
We do currently ask if they have income. So that, I don't know the answer, but that's data we could pull if you're interested.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
If these are people that are trying to support themselves and they run into trouble, a big hospital bill, or
Right.
the car broke down, you can't get to work, those kind of things.
Those are the folks we're hoping to target because those are sustainable situations. For people that have no income, it is not sustainable to pay their rent because we cannot pay their rent every month.
I guess I would make a caveat that there's a difference between employment and income. So this program will target seniors who might be living on a fixed income, have Social Security. That would count, and those folks would be eligible for this program, but they might not be employed.
Thank you, Sarah. I consider, yeah.
And the prioritization questions will hopefully tease out is part of the reason you're seeking assistance, because you had an emergency medical incident. Temporary, one of the words we talked about in the HSC meeting was temporary loss of income, which in my mind might mean lapse benefits for whatever reason, which we do see with folks, or a loss of employment. But we really lean into that temporary part of that.
Yes, I processed one today where the gentleman had a stroke. And so he actually will rehab and get back to work, but he needed this covered. So.
Kristen, I'm really pleased how you described at the beginning how it was a group of people who did the work to sort of redesign this.
Yeah.
And yet when I look at that workflow, it seems like there's a lot on your shoulders with that prioritization tool. And I know that, I mean, that was one of the benefits of the lottery, was that no one really owned
Yes.
the decision. It was random. How are you protecting yourself, relying on a team to make sure that any bias you might have, any, all with good intentions, how are you protecting yourself against that?
Well, I think that we're going to have to see how it goes. If we do this the first week and all of the scores are the highest possible score, we got a problem. But if we're not targeting the populations and getting enough difference in scores, then we'll have to adjust the prioritization tool. I might be delusional, but I don't think it will be as labor intensive as it could be. And honestly, the lottery system is more labor intensive for me than people think. But I have had that thought. I do not want to be a decision maker. I want the prioritization tool to be the decision maker.
And one of the things we talked about at this past week's meeting was just that opportunity of calling in partner agencies to, once we have the initial poll from when it's open, have a meeting like to sit and review those prioritizations with Kristen. And so she can talk through, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm seeing. So we're being transparent with the partners. And if there's gray areas, then we're talking with the partners and, being really open about the need to iterate as we move forward without any major disruptions in the overall qualifications, because we know our partners don't like that. As long as the eligibility criteria stay the same, it's the prioritization kind of that's beneath the surface that we know we need to be really transparent with our partners on and flexible in terms of making sure we are getting those priority populations that we want.
And did you say that you are prioritizing individuals that have income or are working? Which did you say?
I mean, have income. It doesn't matter to us where it's from, as long as they have income.
Okay. And do you have like an income threshold?
That gets tricky because if we put a threshold we have to include people that are on disability and limited income in that, because those people have very few choices if they get evicted from their income-based or affordable housing unit. They will have a very hard time finding another spot. So we cannot, I don't know that we've sussed out what the income limit would be, but it cannot be 0.
Well, and provision of some proof of income and looking at what's the rent. And that's how Kristen regularly assesses. This isn't sustainable. We see that all the time. So I think you could have some income, but you're in a unit that isn't tenable, even with that income, it is going to take, on her part, looking at each individual situation. But because the limited funding, I do think that it's, for now, we think it's manageable. But it's looking up, does that income, is it sustainable related to the rent?
And our concerns is if you don't allow it to just be income, then seniors would not be eligible over 65.
For people who receive disability benefits.
Right.
And so when it comes to when you do identify an individual, right, that may need to consider an alternate unit.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on having that conversation with that individual? Because they may not want to consider an alternate unit, right? But so what is going to be your conversation or pathway with encouraging them to consider an alternate unit and then finding that alternate unit for that individual or that family either in Lawrence or across the county?
I think the processing agencies are already very good. I mean, they're doing case management all the time. I think they are very comfortable having conversations saying, you've been selected for the HSC assistance. You cannot afford this unit going forward. How about we help find you a unit you can sustain so you're not under this stress all the time. I think likely folks move into whatever unit they can get approved in, and then they're stuck and they are in financial crisis just every month. Because how rentals are so limited, you just have to take what you can get. But if we give them support in that housing search, we likely could find them a unit that better suits their income.
So are you saying that often your team finds that individuals are approved for units that they cannot afford?
Yes, they either got approved, I would guess, because it's a tough rental market, I would guess their financial situation changed because landlords are generally requiring 3 times the rent as income. So if they got into that unit and then let's say their household makeup changed, their voucher amount changed, they went from employed to on disability income, but they're just stuck in that unit because the market is so tight. And it's expensive to move.
And so even with moving expenses, how is the team going to?
So the move-in cost would be covered by the move-in assistance, so the first month's rent and deposit. I don't think we've thought about actually moving people. A lot of folks, especially on disability, are going to need help actually moving. Some people have plenty of supports and move themselves. Other times we have teams of people from various agencies that come together and help someone move.
So there may be moving costs associated with this work as well coming forward. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
It strikes me that it may be some interesting data to keep, and please correct me if I'm wrong, on the income that people are coming in with as related to the expensive rent that they are currently having, and then the availability that you all have and finding, is there in finding units that they can afford with the income that they have, right? I just think that's going to be really interesting. Do you already know that data, or is that something that you're interested to get?
The data on how, if there was a change in the income from move-in to crisis?
Let me rephrase it. So I often hear from people that the wages are too low
Yes.
for what rents are, right? And what you're saying is you think that there may be places that people can get that will match their income. I'm not saying wages, but that match their income. Do you know? I mean, I think that's true, but it sounds like you're starting to actually pick out whether we have some data that actually shows whether that's true or not. Or maybe you already have it.
I don't think we do just yet, but
Yeah.
as we work through the fields that we want to have filled out, and we're actually, the IT director and her team, when we were doing a fresh look at the application, we're also looking at what information is gathered by the self-help center as well, and how do we just make sure we're collecting the information that we need, and that is going to be able to help us evaluate the success of this program moving forward. So yes, Commissioner, if I hear what you're saying, it'll help us be able to like illustrate that there is a huge, this is the gap. The gap is, this is what most of these folks are making. This is what their monthly income is. Compare that with what are the rents.
Yeah.
That's something that I think we can work on.
And then do you also have data on voucher placements and when individuals are being placed, if then in the future, those vouchers are going up? Because I think you also said that. So if when an individual is being placed on a voucher and then let's say 6 months or a year later, right, those vouchers are going up and then it's becoming unsustainable for that individual to stay in that particular unit. And then they do have to move to a different unit, right, that is cheaper. Why is that particular unit going up for that particular place? And so do we have data on that so that we can kind of track the
Housing
various
Authority.
units?
Housing Authority would have that, and we can always ask that, and that's always a challenge for them.
And I would also just offer just a little bit of clarification, and Kristen can correct me if I'm wrong on any of these details, but you know, when you're talking about or referencing this idea that a voucher goes up or down, that is, so the way a voucher works is the initial rent amount is determined based on the income you have that day when you sign the lease and the amount, you know, that HUD allows it to go up to, right? And then that's the amount that it is until it isn't, until your income changes, either because you get a $1 an hour raise or because your hours get cut in half, whichever way it goes. Then you have a very strict amount of time that you have to submit your change of income or your change of household makeup, since now you have 2 new people that live with you, and that information needs to be shared with Housing Authority, and all that goes into a formula that then adjusts the amount of the voucher. So the fluctuation of the voucher amount, the subsidy that folks receive from the Housing Authority is specifically based on their income and how that may or may not fluctuate. And so sometimes for folks, that rent amount is yo-yoing and changing all over the place because, you know, they're having a hard time maintaining a single job. Maybe they are having to add additional jobs, right? And so that fluctuation with the Housing Authority is kind of unique in that way, and that there's such a specific formula that has to change or is calculated based on every change in income or household makeup.
And the Housing Stabilization Collaborative is not just paying folks on vouchers. It may be folks that just have general rent and they're on a waiting list. It could be, there's no voucher requirement for this program.
Agreed, but I think that's something that would be really, it's a good data point for us to take a look at, right? Because that's something that we did talk about. And I think something that I consistently hear from seniors is that their their rent is changing, that their vouchers, that particular space is changing for them. So I don't know if it's that their income is changing and whatever's being reported to their property owners are actually changing, but either way, their rent is changing and their housing situations are changing. So either it is their property owner that is changing it on them, or whatever's being reported to their property owner is somehow changing. So either way, right, it's something that we should take a look at and better understand so that whichever population we're serving, we can better serve them and protect them.
Sure.
Kristen, the work that you all did to get here tells me that you looked at some data that said this isn't having the impact that we were hoping it was going to have, right? You said like, I'm especially excited that we're not saying you have to have an eviction
Yes.
to be doing this and it's a month. What data are you going to continue to collect to understand the impact that this is having? That, you know, when we when the Douglas County taxpayers and your department offers that,
Right.
that down the road we can see, yes, we're doing it, or we need to make another adjustment.
So the processing agencies do follow-up calls to try to determine if if the previous funding has prevented homelessness. That data is reliant on somebody's phone still being on, answering the phone, or calling you back. I don't know that it's a full picture. I would love to capture that data. We need to know our outcomes. And I would be happy to try to figure out a better way to determine if we're delaying or preventing homelessness. A lot of the feelings we have in the group is because we are writing proposals and funding proposals that are very large amounts. And we know they do not have income, and it would be a smart business decision to the next month when they do not pay rent to evict them. And it feels like we're not making good use of the taxpayers' money. And
I
it's
also think
sorry.
No, some of the, data is also coming through in, Kristen also sits in the regional homeless coordination space. So that was her former role, but there's overlap there in terms in other aspects of her position. So each week she's sitting on those coordinated entry system calls and hearing about who's on the list, who's looking for housing. And so, I know that a lot of the folks are familiar to the agencies, and there's sharing amongst agencies around mutual individuals to try to problem solve. So a lot of that's on a case by case basis. And then, Kristen is often whether or not folks can be assisted in the lottery or not, our HSC is a good solution. She gets a lot of calls, and Kristen, just like whether it's HSC, she knows where a lot of other programmatic offerings are. So just give an example of like the supportive housing funds that you've talked to Sarah and I about.
Sure. So KDAD's, Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services, has supportive housing funds. It's a statewide program. Those funds are dispersed through the local CMHC or CCBHC. So whatever mental health center serves your area gets those funds, but they're not allocated only to patients or clients of those CCBHCs. They're actually available to anybody with SPMI. There's a few other requirements. Healthy Blue also has housing costs. That's a Medicaid provider like United or Sunflower, but only Healthy Blue has that. So in those situations, I can try to route them to other funding streams. Just today, somebody called and said they needed help with a utility bill. There's a church that could cover that exact cost. So part of it is just broadening the tools, I guess, that we have.
I don't have any questions. I have comments, so I'm thinking out loud that maybe I'll save that in case commissioners have more questions first.
I think I just have one last question. On page 12 of the slides, It states improved coordination with district court, self-help center, and other community partners for additional supports, legal advice and representation, mediation, emergency assistance, routing applicants to additional community supports. Is this tenant's right to counsel? Is this like a form of supporting the tenant right to counsel work?
No, these collaborations have been in place. So improved coordination. Coordination has been there for a good amount of time. Part of the workflow process on the HSC website has always been a warm handoff to district court self-help. And district court self-help has had a referral process in the past to make referrals for mediation with building peace, and just exploring whether or not, self-help center doesn't give legal advice, but they can provide guidance on certain things, and they can also help make a referral to Kansas Legal Services. If you recall the work session that we had this past summer, they talked about, the self-help center talked about having Kansas Legal Services having office hours. So we just want to improve that. But this bullet was also just acknowledging that we have an opportunity through this process and this program to do additional things based on the conversations that the commission has had in the last few months related to legal representation, mediation, whatever. We already have a really good, we have opportunities for improvement with self-help and other partners. So that's really just acknowledging that we can improve where we're at.
Okay, so the tenant right to counsel conversation is still a conversation that we're still having and moving forward with. This is a completely separate, I'm gonna call it like bucket of work.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, thank you.
I've got a question, and I know in general, the funding that we have available is a percentage of the need of what requests are coming in now, and that's why the lottery, et cetera. As we change to this other model, this prioritization, like I'm really curious to see, like, of the folks who kind of get through those basic eligibility questions, like what percentage of that need gets met? Because I know we've now kind of, you're only prioritizing the ones that meet those eligibility requirements, including having some amount of income. And I know we won't know that now, but I'm curious about that moving forward. Like, how does that change between, we have this many dollars in requests, this is the percentage we can help with, versus once we've applied that eligibility tool, what percentage of those that are eligible, that have kind of been determined that they are potentially sustainable folks, that if we help, like what percentage of that are we making? I think that would be something that the commission might be interested in knowing kind of moving forward, because that helps us understand our community better.
Absolutely. I love that idea. Right now, we're funding 10% of those that apply. The need won't change, of course, but we can narrow it down and see how many of those that are eligible are being funded. And I would love to provide that after, a few months.
So I just wanted to be take a moment to be complimentary and appreciative, one, for staff's work on this and the intention that you've brought to the conversation in the position, Kristen, and really drawing to the surface some realities and unintended consequences of all the stops and starts and try agains that have happened with HSC over the years. And I also just want to, in case any of our HSC partners are listening or listen to this later, share some appreciation for them, and that it has been, I've really appreciated, for as frustrating and as much of a dead end and it can feel at sometimes in some ways, this whole HSC process over the past several years, the evolution of it, I think, has been a healthy process for our community. And as somebody who works in social service agencies, I think it's been a really healthy process for practitioners in different roles in different communities, both in terms of the ability that it's created for really strengthened relationships and referral process amongst everybody, but also just that shared space of problem solving and thinking through possibilities and pathways and different ways of doing things. And that takes a lot of vulnerability for people to lean into sometimes. And as somebody who's worked in social services for a long time, scarcity mindset can really take over and make us all really close to cuff and sort of competitive in some ways with each other. And I think the HSC in this particular program over the years and how it's evolved has contributed a lot to changing that for organizations. So I just want to highlight that. And I really appreciated reading this background. Very good AIR in terms of the real full scope of like where we were, where we are now, and where we hope to go. And so I want to compliment that part, appreciate all the members of HSC for the patience and the tenacity of figuring it out as we go along. And I'll also just, I mean, Jill commented on it earlier, like echo that there's definitely a desire to make this change and keep things steady for a while. So I'm glad to hear that that is reflected in this conversation tonight, that like the notion that some iterations and adjustments to the prioritization tool along the way, that part makes sense to me. And that I imagine that will sort of be the meat and potatoes, if you will, of HSC conversations for the year to come. But that this overarching framework and new way of doing things, the increase in frequency, which is huge. I know you know that, but I'm just going to double down on how, 2 times a month was never enough. Going to 1 time a month was very unawesome. And so I'm excited about I'm excited about this weekly review. And I hope that's helpful in your workflow, but also just the ability to be more predictable in how folks are talking with their clients about what to expect the next steps to be. So I'm just really was excited to read this, as it is hopeful about both the data and information that it might help us digest a little bit better that we've talked about here on the commission level, but also the ability for service providers and the folks that we're serving to have a clearer understanding of some intent and purpose behind the process. And I think that's really strongly reflected in where we are now. And that it took a lot of starts and stops and try agains to get here.
And I came in kind of in the middle of it, but the HSC has been so helpful to me in catching me up to speed and supporting the changes. They came with these same ideas, and I think they are also excited about the changes. So.
Reiterate, you've been here since about May.
Yeah.
And you've flagged to us pretty early on, like that there were better things that could be happening with this program. And I've been really excited about that and knew that this was in the works and glad to hear kind of what's coming forward and the solutions that you're bringing to us for the problems that you flagged. And that's just an exciting process. And I just appreciate you being in this role.
I appreciate that.
This is not an action item, but we're going to take public comment. Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate it. I'm going to take public comment on this item.
John M. 66049 is a very interesting program, one I wasn't aware of, kind of like a rescue program. We touched on seniors, which I would think the town is full of them. I'm one, in case you haven't guessed. The older you get, the more vulnerable you get to medical challenges. And whether, mostly we talked about rentals, a lot of seniors are living on the edge with fixed income in a house that they're potentially, if they have a mortgage, they're at risk. So I'm wondering, medical can be devastating, and it can be a large amount. We didn't really talk, and this is something the commission might think about, and I realize she can't answer me, but you could easily get a very, very large bill from the hospital and the medical establishment that threatens your ability to maintain your finances and disrupts your living arrangements. I guess the question is, do we potentially, because of the size of the program, we have to limit who we can rescue, but there are situations where a senior could lose a lot because of the situation of being a senior and being a medical emergency. So I would ask the question to what extent we can actually intercede effectively in those kinds of scenarios. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay. Bring it back up to the commission for any other questions or comments. Again, it's a no action item. I want to echo the hour's getting a little late. My colleagues' appreciation for the work here. Some of us have seen a lot of progressions of this along the way, and recognizing that we need more information always. I think it is a good move to continue to adjust, though not very often, because that would be unawesome. Is that what it was? But you know, sometimes it's hard to say that what we were doing wasn't getting the outcome that we hoped, and especially in a space where there will never be enough to meet all the needs that we have out there. I appreciate trying to continue to refine it and doing it with a group of people. That facilitation is not easy. They all come with their own goals and ideas of how we should move forward. So thanks to Jill and Kristen, your whole team, for the work that you've done on this.
I want to make sure I recognize Jake too, because in the period, Jake is always a great resource to both Kristen and I, because he administered the program before Kristen was hired, and in the gap between hiring her and her predecessor. So Jake is a huge asset to the program. And Kristen already mentioned our IT staff, who's really enthusiastic about helping us create a new application tool and are really attuned to capturing data like we've talked about today.
That's really great to hear, Jill. Thank you. I just thought Jake was only there for PowerPoint help. I really didn't think he did anything else. Okay, that's our last agenda item for the evening. We move on to appointments. I don't think we have any appointments unless commissioners have new ones. Then we move on to commissioner or administrator miscellaneous, and we usually start with Sarah's memo.
Thanks, commissioners. An updated memo is attached to your packet. A date I forgot to remind Jake to add back to this. Jake also helps with the weekly memo. So one of the many things Jake does for us. Next Wednesday, you have a judge's lunch. So the next Wednesday at noon is our first meeting, judge's lunch of 2026. Jill provided an update on the Child Care Scholarship Challenge Grant. They've gotten some challenge scholarship donations, and so of 29,525 so far. So we're moving forward on that. And big day tomorrow on the 15th is the applications for the property tax rebate program related to some of the things that we've talked about will be released. The web form will be live, and in-person submissions can also be done there too. So that is moving forward. Next week, commissioners, we do not have a work session at 4. That's all I have for you.
Any miscellaneous items, commissioners? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned.